Today you're going to learn how to create floating ambient particles in a scene using geometry nodes in Blender. So let's do it. Okay, I'm going to show you two ways of doing this technique with geometry nodes. Let's start with the first one. Let's go to geometry nodes, create a new profile, and let's use a cube node. So we can change the size of the cube. The cube will be the size of the area of the particles. So let's make it bigger. And now let's convert this cube to a volume with mesh to volume. And now let's add in the volume points with distribute points in volume. And thanks to this parameter, we can add more points or less points inside this cube. Perfect. Now let's add an object in the middle so we can see better these particles and have like a reference. I'm going to lock this and I'm going to make the cube bigger. If we make the object bigger, we have more particles. So maybe we need to decrease the density. Something more or less like this. Okay. I'm going to hide the overlays just to see better everything else. And now to animate this, as you can see, if we press play, nothing happens because we don't have any animation. So we can name these particles. So we need to use set position. And we need to use a vector animation. So let's use noise texture. We are going to play with offset and we're going to use color because color have the information of vectors. So let's go into here. And now to animate this, I recommend you always to start in 0 with everything and decrease this. So what we have to do to animate these particles is to select 4D, and now we have this value, and if we play with this value, you will notice that the points, the particles, are being animated. So to animate this over time, we can use a scene time. You can use it in seconds or frames. If you use it in frames, it will be too fast. If you use it in seconds, it will be okay. Also, if you want to increase the velocity, you can increase the scale. Or what you can do is to add here a math node and multiply this value by something, for example, by 2, to make it faster. Okay. Okay, so now we have this, but we have a problem. The particles doesn't move too much. I mean, we can make it faster if you want, but they move more or less in the same space. And I want the particles to move around all the scene. So to do this, what we have to do is to scale this animation, this vector. Remember that any movement is a vector. So let's use vector math and select scale. And now if we scale this vector, this animation, it's going to move faster and more. However, as you can see, they are moving, they are being displaced in this axis. We can solve this using another vector math and subtracting 0.5, this one option, or you can disable this. Use the one that you prefer. Now, as you can see, the particles move more around the space, but they are going too fast. So what we can do is to decrease this, or remember, decrease the velocity of here, like this. Perfect, we have almost this done. And now let's give an instance to these particles with instance on points. I'm going to increase the time by 1000. And what you can do is to use, for example, UV spheres, make it smaller, a little bit smaller. It's okay, but I want to show you a little trick on how to make like the particles blur without using depth of field. But to do this trick, we need to use, instead of this, we need to use mesh cycles. We need a flat object. First of all, we need to fill this with a mesh. So here, let's select n-gons. And I want to use this because we are going to apply here a gradient spherical. So it's easier to apply it in a flat object than a 3D object like a UV sphere. By the way, now as you can see, we can see that this is flat, so it's ugly. But the important thing is that when we render this, so we need a camera. Let's select the camera view. We need that the particles are facing the camera to fake that they are UV spheres. This is really easy to do. The only thing we have to do is to get the object info of the camera and connect rotation with rotation. So now the rotation of the instance are aligned with the rotation of the camera. What this means is that if I try to move the camera, as you can see, the particles always are facing the camera. So it looks like they are UV spheres. Perfect. Of course, if we go out of the camera, we can see this trick. As you can see, here's the camera, and all the particles are facing the camera. But the important thing, is the video, because it's the thing that we're going to render. Now, if you want to give random scales to the particles, we can apply here a random value and select a range of scale, for example, between 0.1 and maybe something like this. So we have a random scale. Okay, let's go to the render view. Let's apply a material, set material. Let's use the default material, and let's make this, for example, the light of the background dark, and let's add a light. I'm doing this with my add-on because it's faster, but you can do it normally, going there, and adding a light. And now what I want is to make the particles more blur. Of course, what we can do is to open the settings of the camera and activate depth of field. Select an object, for example, this one, or you can do it manually. And if we decrease this, we can create this effect of blur, as you can see. But I want to show you another trick. If you want to use this, or you can use this and my technique. So to fake the blur in these particles, the only thing you have to do, let's go to the material of the particles. Let's select here shader editor. Let's set the particles. Let's call this particles. And what we have to do is to apply, let me zoom, for example, this one. We need to apply a gradient texture, and we need to select a spherical. This is important. Let's connect this, for example, in base color. And now, as you can see, the gradient texture is like more or less something like this. So basically, it's like the center is here. We don't want that. We want that the center is in the middle, so we have the gradient from the center to the limits. So to do this, we need to apply here with Ctrl T these two nodes, or at least this one. You can delete this if you want. And we need to select object. When we use object, we are saying that the center of this texture will be the center of the object. So let's select object. And now it's working perfectly, but we cannot see difference because we need to make contrast. So we can use color ramp, for example. And if you push this, look. Now we can see better this blur effect. You can use this, or if you want, you can use curve this one, and it's the same. And we can have more control, faster if you want. By the way, to see better, what we can do, for example, is to use the alpha. So the black parts will be transparent. As you can see, You can reset here if you want. And doing this, we can see better that. To not see this noise, what we can do is to press N, go to Options, and select here Blended. And you can see that now we are faking the blur effect. So see the difference between now and before. And also, if you want, you can use color ramp and this one at the same time. It's okay. So if you want to change the color, you can change the color here. We can push this if you want, and then this. It's easier, as you can see. But now, if we go to the camera view, okay, so we are in the camera view, and if I press play, look at the difference. Now, we created like a blur effect without applying a depth of field. And what you can do if you want, by the way, also, if you want, you can use emission. If you want the particles to emit light, just connect it here, and you can increase this a little bit. We can apply a glow. I'm going to do it with my add-on that is faster. But remember, to apply a glow, only go to compositing, activate the nodes, and use this node. Let me see this. Okay. And we can play with that to make it more blur, or play with the brightness. So this is how we create these fake particles floating around the scene. And remember, you can go to geometry nodes to play with the scale. To make it bigger, I need to select the particles. If we play with this value, we can make it bigger. And also you have this to make it bigger or smaller. And remember here, you can play with the scale if you want the particles to move more, and you can multiply this by a lower number. And if you want to control the number of particles, decrease this number. For example, let's divide it by 4. And now we have less particles. And also remember that you have the size of the cube to play with the, so let's select this is the cube. We cannot see too much, but more or less. So if you make the cube bigger, for example, in this axis, so you can press Ctrl Shift left click to see the cube. Now we have particles around this, as you can see. So play with the size of the cube to add more particles in one axis or another. Okay, now let's see this with simulation nodes. Okay, with simulation nodes, what we're going to do is to delete this. And I'm going to keep this because it's the same that we're going to use in simulation nodes. So what we need is an object that will be the emitter of the particles. Let's use, for example, a grid. Let's use this. Now we cannot see the grid because... Why cannot see the grid? Let me think. Why I cannot see the grid? Ah, it's there. Okay. Let's move this here and this here. So this will be the particle emitter, and what we have to do is to convert this grid, this floor, in points with distribute points on faces. And it's the same concept. We have the density, we can add more points or less. Now we want less, something like 0.2, for example. And now we need to use simulation nodes. So let's use simulation nodes. Let's disconnect this here. Later I'm going to use all this, so for now I'm going to move it here. Let's focus on this, and let's connect this here. And if you don't know how this works, basically whatever you add in the middle of these two nodes is going to repeat the node or any value that you change every frame when we press play. So if we want to add copies of this, what we have to do is to use join geometry. If we connect this here, remember, it's going to repeat whatever is in the middle. So if we add this here, every new frame is going to add a copy of this. And now, if we press play, we don't see anything because all the points are in the same position. So what we have to do is to use set position here to push these particles, for example, in this axis. So let's use set position. And now, if I make a change, remember, for example, 0.2, it's going to repeat every frame this value. That means that it's going to push the particles 0.2 every frame when I press play. So we have this effect. The first particles are being pushed up and the new particles are appearing here. However, as you can see, they have all the same position. That's why we have this design. So what we have to do is to play with the seed, because the seed is the position of the particles when we start. So what we can do is to use a scene time in frames. So every frame, remember these have the information of the time, is going to have a different seed. For example, in the frame 1, we will have the seed 1. In the frame 2, we will have the seed 2. So now, if we press play, we have this effect. As you can see, there are too many particles, so let's decrease the density. For example, 0.001. Let's start again. And now we have this effect. Maybe let's add 5. Okay. And now what we can do is to apply here what we did before. So this animation, let's apply it here. Let's push this. And now we have this is too strong. So let's decrease this, for example, to 2. And we have this, but we have a problem. As you can see, the particles follow some pattern and they create this pattern like snakes, as you can see. So to solve this problem, we can use here in vector index. Why? Because index have the information of each particle. Each particle have an index, a number, and this is like the original pattern of this noise texture. However, if we say for each index use a different vector, that means that they are not going to follow anymore the same pattern, so we avoid this problem of like this type of snakes that we saw before. And now, if I start again, we have this effect. This is too strong, as you can see, so I'm going to decrease this. And remember that we are emitting particles from this object. Remember. Actually, if you want to see this object, what we can do is to use here another join geometry and connect it here. We can see better the particle emitter. And now what I want is to push these particles up. So for example, to create this effect that the particles come from the floor. So we need to apply here another force. We can do this with another vector math. And we're going to use this one. And for example, like before, 0.2. And now if we press play, we have this effect, this animation. If we start again, you can see better this thing. And remember, we can play with these values to make it faster or this scale. However you want. And now, the only thing we have to do is to apply this like before. So, this is the particles. Let's connect this here, and this here. And if we come back to the render view, we have this effect. Let's press 0 to see the camera. And let's move the camera. If it's too fast, then let's decrease this a bit more. Maybe I need to... yes, I know what I have to do. I need to apply this after this, because I cannot... Because right now I'm not decreasing this. So this should be after this. So we are scaling this vector and this vector, the noise texture and the vector that goes up, as you can see right now. You see, now everything goes fast, and if I decrease this, I'm decreasing both vector at the same time. So these are the two techniques to create this effect. Remember, you can use without simulation nodes or with simulation nodes if you want to make this animation. So I hope you learned something new, and if you like this video, please give a like, subscribe, and remember, you can download this project and many more on my Patreon. And see you in the next video.